So now we will have a business panel. We had a governance one earlier today, and we will turn to businesses. My name is Jan-Gunnar Winther. I'm the director for the Center of the Ocean and the Arctic at UiT, the Arctic University of Norway. I will moderate this session. It will be in two parts. We will have a keynote first by Berit Figenschau, Director, Innovation Norway Arctic. And then we will invite a couple more people to the stage and we will have a conversation. I will also try to open for the audience to ask questions, so please think of something. But first, and without any further ado, Berit, the floor is yours.
Thank you so much, Jan-Gunnar. Thank you for the opportunity to come here and talk to you about business development in northern Norway. I will give you an overview and then we go to the panel afterwards. My name is Berit. I am the Director of Innovation Norway in the Arctic, and the Arctic is the counties Troms and Finnmark. And there is another director for Nordland. And I see that she sent a spy, Fredrik, is sitting here, making sure I talk nicely about Nordland while I'm doing this presentation. Okay, I was thinking of doing three brief overviews, giving you an overview of development trends in the business sector in Northern Norway, and then just briefly show you what Innovation Norway has contributed with in 2025, and then a little warm-up for the panel. How can we create more startups, more scale-ups and skilled jobs in this region? How to take the temperature on the business sector in Northern Norway. I will look into three areas: the labor market, a number of bankruptcies, and then how many new businesses in 2025. And what you can see here, not so nice, but okay. Almost 250,000 people are working in 2025. That's 900 more employees than in 24, which is good. It's green arrows point in the right direction in Troms and Finnmark. It's a little bit decline in Nordland. Sorry about that, Fredrik. But what concerns me is two things. 58% only working in the private sector, the rest in public sector. And it's actually in Troms is the region that has most people in the public sector. That is one concern. The other concern is 65,000 people in the north is outside labor market. 65,000 people that could be working, and we need the competence and we need the people, which is not good. When we look at bankruptcies, it's good that the numbers are low. 41 bankruptcies in 25. It's 100 less than in 24, and green arrows pointing the right direction in both Nordland, Troms and Finnmark. And finally, new businesses, almost 4,400 new businesses, startups in 25. It's 162 more startups than in 24. Growth in Troms and Finnmark is a small decline, only 9 startups less compared to 24 in Nordland. So that is the brief overview. When it comes to export, Northern Norway exported goods and services for 133 billion Norwegian kroner in 25. And these numbers are excluding oil and gas. And the increase from 24 is very high, 80% increase, and it has doubled the last 5 years. So when it comes to export, excluding oil and gas, we can see that the northern part of Norway is growing most. And where do we grow? It's in seafood. More than half of the export is from seafood industry, and then energy-intensive industry and tourism are also important contributors. And the picture to the right shows export intensity in the Norwegian counties. And the figure shows that Nordland is the third most export incentive country, how many numbers export per employees. So export is very important for Northern Norway. So how did Innovation Norway contribute in 2025? Innovation Norway, we are the government's tool to realize business development throughout the country. We are owned both by the state and the county municipalities. 51% by the state and 49% by the counties. And I will let this movie tell us about how we work with business in general to make local ideas global opportunities, which is our
Innovation Norway, we work every day to give local ideas global opportunities. We succeed in this when we join forces to ensure that Norwegian companies obtain the competence, capital and networks they need to succeed in growing and scaling internationally. With offices in over 20 countries, we make it easier for Norwegian companies to step out into the world. In the past year, we have awarded 7.1 billion Norwegian kroners in loans, grants and guarantees to support promising ideas. In this way, we have helped to create new jobs nationwide and made it possible to transform creativity and courage into product development and value creation. With clear targets for green transition and growth, we offer scaling programs and financing to enable more companies to expand and strengthen their competitiveness nationally and internationally. The EU is investing billions in developing new industries that will contribute to solving major challenges. Our experts assist companies that want to participate in the international competition for these funds. Our national export initiatives highlight the potential for Norwegian companies to compete successfully in selected global industries. We support companies with ambitious projects within offshore wind, more and greener maritime exports, tourism, health and life science, manufacturing and design, and we are ready for entirely new ventures such as aquaculture. Through trade fairs, delegations, the Made in Norway label, and Norway's official portal to the world, businessnorway.com, Innovation Norway gives your business international visibility. That is precisely what we work for, to give local ideas global opportunities.
Okay, thank you for that. And we're so proud to say that we helped local businesses in Northern Norway with 1.5 billion Norwegian kroner in 2025. We helped more than 450 business projects and 81 startup companies. And you see the numbers spent in Nordland, Troms and Finnmark there. And what is as is important is to say that this is the government and the municipalities helping businesses to start and to scale, but it also attracts private capital as well. So it's a very good point that 1 Norwegian krone from the government makes 1.5 from the private sector. So this is a joint venture between government and private sector, which is very good. I'll show you a couple of cases that we funded through loans and grants. This is Harstad Tørdok, or more known as Hamek in Harstad. It's a shipyard in Harstad, a cornerstone company in the region, which functions as the largest service facility for the maritime industry, including aquaculture, fisheries, and offshore. Now, this investment in the dry dock or in the shipyard, putting a roof over it, is, I think, one of the largest industrial projects in the region, and it's strategically important, both when it comes to defense and for the local maritime industry. This will enable Hamek to provide parts of the ship support and maintenance of the British frigates when they will come sailing through the northern part of Norway, and of course it will contribute to safety and preparedness along the Norwegian coast. now further down in Møre og Romsdal or in Vestland, they're not so happy because they were hoping for other outcome of the frigates. But in the northern part of Norway, we're very happy about this. Another thing is that we always say that the North Norwegian people cannot cooperate. Well, I have one example that we are so good in cooperating. Rå Biopark in Senja. I think it's the largest environmental collaboration in the north. It's owned by 7 intermunicipal waste companies, and this investment will be Norway's first full-scale biochar facility integrated with biogas production. It will process up to 80,000 tons of organic waste or food waste yearly from 41 different municipalities in the northern Norway. So the total investment is 630 million Norwegian kroner, and both Enova and Innovation Norway has been helping, and we also attracted some Japanese investor as well in this facility. So it's very exciting to see how we will go into the future. I have to talk a little bit about international growth and EU funding, because most North Norwegian companies are small in an international scale. They often have challenges in getting in touch with relevant partners in new markets, and they need a door opener. We do that in Innovation Norway. So in 2025, we worked with 70 North Norwegian companies to strengthen their position in an international market and to help them into new contracts. It's very important that Norwegian businesses see opportunities abroad. And we helped 60 deliveries on EU consultancy in 2025 as well. Because through EU, European programs and funding schemes, such as Horizon Europe, Digital Europe, Invest EU and similar programs, Norwegian companies can access European funding, expertise and networking schemes at the same level as EU member states. But it's very complex to understand the application process. So there's where Innovation Norway help. We have people loving to read those complicated processes and help Norwegian businesses dig into that to get more funds. And then finally, we're so proud of TestNord and Change Engineering in Harstad, which managed to get into the EFD, European Defence Fund, to get more partners and funding. And 2 of the 5 Norwegian companies into NATO's Diana Accelerator program is from the Arctic. And I'm told that the Nord layer, or the eye of the needle, is very narrow to get into the NATO Diana program, and TestNord and Avio Solutions from the north is in that program. So we're very proud of that. And finally, these are the 4 sectors we see more growth, and we will have to support business development, and I hope that decision makers and politicians also see the same opportunity as we do here. Aquaculture and the supplier industry to the aquaculture, tourism, space and technology, and defense, of course. And this is just a small warm-up to the panel debate. How can we create more startups, scale-ups, and skilled jobs in the north? I'm talking about export. We have to do more on that. I suggest an Arctic accelerator to help the businesses to scale, because it's very, very hard to scale when you start a new company. And then, of course, we need more capital to support the business growth in the Nordic Arctic. And with that, I think I conclude.
Thank you so much, Berit, for the overview and framing what will be the discussion now. I will also invite to the stage 2 gentlemen. Malte, Humpert, investigative journalist from the High North News, please. And then we have Stefan Steinicke, Senior Manager, Security and Raw Materials with the Federation of German Industries, EDI. So we now heard Berit have a mostly northern Norwegian perspective. I will give you a couple of minutes each to put your perspectives on the table. I will just say to the audience, we will circle around energy, space, and metals in this discussion. And Malte has got most of the energy hat on his head. Here is the metal guy and space there. But it's not in isolation silos, but energy, space, and metals. We will, of course, have a focus on the regional development, but we will also speak a lot about collaboration with EU. Maybe we'll make a detour to China or US, who knows, but EU will be a key component of our conversation. And we will spend some time on green transition as the future business model. So by that, Stefan, please.
Thank you very much. Thank you to the organizers for the invitation and for congratulations for organizing such a successful event. Maybe to kick us off, a few words on critical raw materials. From my perspective, working at the German industry, we are walking into a metals crisis. And what do I mean by a metals crisis? I mean that the demand for critical minerals, be it lithium, be it graphite, be it rare earth elements, the global demand is growing exponentially. But the supply is not keeping up. To give you an understanding, to open a new mine from digging your first hole to bringing the mine online, on average, on the global average, you need 10 to 15 years. But we face already at the end of this decade large-scale supply deficits for a variety of critical minerals. That's why we face a metals crisis. And if we don't secure the primary input of critical minerals into our industrial processes, we as the German industry, as the Norwegian industry, as Western industries, we won't play a decisive role in the lead markets of the future, be it the green transition, be it digitization, or be it the necessary military buildup. So structural supply deficits is one part of the reason why we face a metals crisis. The other part is that we increasingly see what I would call a geopoliticization of raw material supply chains. And I would just want to mention China in this regard. Think about what happened last year in April. China announced new export control measures on rare earth elements. And from a German perspective, we were only a few weeks before large-scale production stops. Because for a certain amount of months, no rare earth elements, no permanent magnets were allowed to leave China. And we now have this Damocles sword hanging over our industries. It can happen again at any time. And we would be foolish not to anticipate that China, at a certain time, will use this leverage again. So this is the challenge. Where's the opportunity? I think for Northern Norway, there are several ways how to position itself in this global raw materials game. First, there are certain proven reserves here in Northern Norway, be it with regard to rare earth elements, to graphite, titanium, to name just a few. You have plenty of cheap energy. Mining and refining is hugely energy-intensive business. If you have cheap energy, then you really have a business case to locate certain parts of these raw materials value chains in Northern Norway. You are strategically located, the third point, between continental Europe and North America. And what both North America and continental Europe are trying at the moment is a China plus one strategy. So here, Northern Norway can play a role as well. And final point, from a German industry perspective, we are looking for reliable partners. Again, we were taken by surprise by China completely stopping the export of certain raw materials. So for more and more German companies, it is no longer only about the cheapest price in order to import raw materials, but it's about having a secure supply. And here, Norway has a proven track record of being a reliable partner when it comes to, for example, to energy exports. I'll stop here. Looking forward to the discussion.
We will continue, and you made a very strong and convincing case. We'll try to drill into that and see if there are some cracks that we can find. But thank you so much for your opening remarks. And then Malte, please.
Thank you very much. I'm excited to be back, and I'll pick up on what Stefan was saying. It's actually been 7 years since I was last here, and boy, has the Arctic and the world changed in that time. And picking up on the metals deficit, we are facing a metals, mineral, energy deficit. Just as Andreas Osthagen was saying last night during the webinar, every time he's here, it feels like there's a new high-rise building being built. And when I arrived at the airport, I was struck by the number of electric vehicles. Being from Germany, we haven't really adopted those yet. And so, both of those examples speak to increasing need for minerals and energy. As a journalist, I usually try to cover topics not from an isolated element, but really to see them as part of a whole. And so I think there is a connection between energy, space, and metals, and where Northern Norway can potentially fit in to really become Europe's future operating system, so to speak. So as we transition away from oil and gas, how can Norway use that proven track record to provide for its European neighbors and to not just see them as individual issues, but as a single value chain? You need energy for metals, hugely energy dependent to extract metals, long timelines as well. Both of them, energy and metals, depend on space-based monitoring, navigation, communication. Even now there's GPS jamming going on in the north, secure communication as Europe wants to become more independent from US-based data centers. And then all three depend on secure and transparent logistics and reliable infrastructure, where Norway has a proven track record to be a reliable provider. So I think for Norway, there's really a chance to strategically position itself in this rapidly changing global system where supply chains can just break away either by something like the Hormuz crisis or deliberately where China decides to provide resources. So especially given those recent events, I think Europe wants and needs supply chain security, and Norway has the resources and the governance track record to really fit into that, whether it's resources for the renewable energy transition, rare earth metals and minerals, for space, satellite. And Europe really needs to decouple from this unstable global supply chain. So looking forward to discussing more on how Northern Norway can fit into this and really become an integrated hub for energy, metals, and space.
Thank you all. So I heard three people with relatively bright perspectives of the future and on the possibility side. I'll try to be a little bit of a devil, if that's okay with you. Take away the oil and gas for the moment. I turn to you again, Malte. But the energy and electricity and Northern Norway. Mm-hmm. You said we have a lot of cheap energy. Yes, but for how long?
And I think that's where Northern Norway needs to make a decision if it wants to continue the existing pathway, being a security provider, oil and gas provider for Europe, and providing putting a lot of energy into the extraction of those resources as well. Electrifying a lot of offshore developments, or if it wants to start investing energy into future potential. And right now there is a surplus of energy, but there's a forecasted deficit for electricity in Norway, and so that would have would kind of question a lot of these future developments, mining minerals, providing renewable energy. Space is really energy intensive as well. So how does Norway make that transition from the previous development aspects into the future, and how can we make sure that by still doing oil and gas, we don't take away from building up future opportunities?
So to simplify, we are going from a situation where we had plenty, and now it's getting more and more challenging, and we have to make the tough decisions, the priorities, and what do we actually prioritize over the other. You are closest to the Norwegian governmental system. Do you see any priorities when it comes to the energy in the north that is raging over others? Or?
No, and it concerns me because, of course, we are dependent on Norwegian oil and gas in Norway and the rest of Europe. At the same time, we know that it is a few further ahead. We have to do. We find new businesses and new legs to stand, new businesses to stand on. So it's a concern that we are so oil dependent, and a lot of the competence in the businesses, the people, the good people, are in that industry, and discover new business models, a green transition. It goes too slow, and I think we don't think far enough.
The slow word. We heard a Canadian ambassador earlier today saying that they actually managed to get down from 7 to 2 years. That's what I heard, in the processes of making decisions for area use. Have you supported any projects that goes in the direction of seeing how we can make our processes more efficient? Because that's really a weak point, I think, for development in the north. Would you agree on that? Or?
Yeah, but it's all the conflicts. It's the system. I think we will go into the Draghi report later and to see why the US and China, they will move so fast when it comes to new technology, for instance. European countries and Norway as well tend to regulate instead of watching for opportunities, and we have to take all these concerns and instead of thinking, okay, this is an opportunity, how we just move on. It's a culture difference, and it's also a fact. So how can we manage with all these? We have to consider, we're a democracy, so we have to consider all the concerns and all the angles of new businesses, but do we need all the new regulations before we do?
Okay, and I hear probably no more than yes, but you don't have to say the word. Yeah, Malte.
And maybe there's a middle ground there too, where yes, accelerating things is beneficial, reducing bureaucracy, but also maybe not trying to compete with China or the US on speed or just on the scale, but actually doing what Norway does really well, which is ESG credibility, regulatory stability, especially when it comes to mining. If we're talking about subsea mining, which is currently on hold, right? But eventually we will probably go there. And I think European companies are not just looking for reliable supplies, but they're also looking for supplies that are politically defensible, where they can say we're not getting the rare earth out of Western China with questionable human rights. So maybe Norway can position itself as being that clean provider, that reliable provider that has a good track record. So yes, maybe a little bit faster, but not giving up on that sustainable element and doing it the right way.
So the ramping up of the defense sector in the north is obvious, and it's coming, and more will come. Could you say a few words, Stefan, about the critical minerals and metals into the defense industry, how critical that really is, and opportunities following?
Yeah, I mean, this nexus, this raw materials defense nexus, is really the nexus that keeps me up at night, to be honest.
Of excitement or?
No, I wish it was like excitement. No, of concern. Just 3 examples. In Ukraine, we see the massive usage of drones. So unmanned systems are part of the future of war. But in order to have unmanned systems, you need batteries. And for batteries, you need lithium, amongst others. Second example, semiconductors. They are basically in everything, amongst others, in precision-guided ammunition. No rocket today finds its goal without specialized gallium arsenide semiconductors. So you need gallium and germanium for semiconductors for defense purposes. And last but not least, permanent magnets are in every defense platform, from submarines to space satellites, and all platforms in between. And for these permanent magnets, you need rare earth elements. And China, on purpose, already decided that it is no longer exporting permanent magnets to defense companies. So we see already today a global scramble by defense companies to get the necessary raw materials they need to produce the weapons we need. And we in Europe finally have taken all our courage to try to ensure our own security and make a massive military build-up in order to generate credible deterrence against Russia and potentially other adversaries. But without the secure supply of these raw materials, we won't get any kind of credible deterrence. So that's why this is really keeping me
So
up.
by having said that, you probably took away 1 or 2 hours of sleep in the whole audience this night. I think it's concerning. I agree. But then we don't have a representative here for the indigenous people or others. But should this crisis that we have in Europe, we need raw material, why should it be digged out in our region?
I think if you look at the scale of the challenge of mining enough minerals only to achieve the Paris climate goal, in order to achieve the Paris climate goal, and this I think should be a goal for all of us, no matter where we live, makes it necessary to really ramp up mining, processing, and refining. And obviously, it should not only be done in northern Norway, but it should be done in Germany as well. And we are doing so. We are opening new mines, new refining and processing facilities. And I think there's another reason why we should do it here in Europe. In Europe, we have the highest environmental standards, the highest labor protection and human rights standards, and compared to mostly all other parts of the globe, we have the lowest CO2 emissions per ton of mined material here in Europe. So if we want to use these minerals, and I think we have to use them, be it for achieving the Paris climate goal or for our defense needs, we need to do it where it is the most sustainable way. And this is here in Europe.
Thank you. I will turn a page now, and I will focus on what we also discussed yesterday at the Pubinar, for those who were there. Not we, but the Minister of Foreign Affairs and also the representative from offshore Norway. We all know that Norway exports now gas to Europe for good reasons. About 1/3 of the consumption in Europe comes from Norwegian gas, and 44%, it was said, of that 1/3 is from the north. So around 15% of the gas consumption in Europe comes from the northern Norway. That's a big number. And of course, it's an acute situation, there is a need, and so on. But what I wanted to drill a little bit deeper into is if Norway managed to both have the short-term acute situation that actually calls for exporting gas primarily from northern Norway, and the more longer-term vision about green transition and an energy mix that is more renewable. Are we stronger on one than the other? If you agree, what are, in a way, the ingredients here, and what could we do to balance that more. Also, as a back curtain of that, I see a China that really believes in a green business model for the future and renewable. And it seems like they stand with that vision and ambition regardless of setbacks that comes and goes. While we have other countries, without mentioning, that maybe takes a different course. In Europe, through the European policies, and also we see now more lately, Draghi report and so on, innovation, technology, green transition is still very much at the table. But Norway, are we playing this out in our best interest, self-interest? Yeah, please, Anne-Berit.
I'm not going to go into the politics, but as a fact, I know that it's been a major cut to Innovation Norway for funding environmental technology schemes. And also for metal and for mineral industry, we have the projects, many of them, but it costs a lot, and the private capital, it's a long way to make it profitable. So maybe if we want to put a rocket on it, we should see if we could get more funding from the government. But I understand that we are in a transition now because we spend most state budget to defense and maybe health care, and we have to prioritize. But I think it connects. It's a supply chain here. It depends on each other. So cutting in this the funding, just leaving it to the market, I think that's a long way to go.
So what do you see, Malte?
I think that's the larger question of how the Ukraine crisis in the last 5 years has affected some of those roadmaps. I mean, you read more and more about different countries potentially struggling to reach the Paris Climate Accord goals. I know Germany is not making as much progress as envisioned. Norway is kind of iffy too. And so the question is, how can Ukraine crisis become an opportunity to make the correct decisions now? And if, for example, in case of Germany gets 50% of its gas from Norway now, and so we replaced Russia with Norway. And yes, we're using less gas now. There's more savings now, more efficiency. But I feel like you replaced one provider with another. In case of Germany, Norway is willing to produce that gas and produce that oil. And so how do we not continue business as usual, but really use this shock to the system to realize that we need to be more on this path of green transition and become less vulnerable to supply chain crises?
Stefan?
In Germany, we really have a debate of whether the state should only set the rules, and within these rules, companies compete on their own, or whether there should be a more state interventionist approach. And if you look at what China has always been doing, there is a strong government hand in the market. And in strategic sectors, you see the same phenomenon increasingly in the US too. For example, in minerals policies, you see massive amounts of money from the government being spent in order to ensure secure supply chains. And in order to build up new supply chains, new value chains in these future markets, you cannot Western companies cannot compete against state-aided Chinese conglomerates. It's just impossible. It's a recipe for disaster. We need closer cooperation between the business and the government. Otherwise, we won't simply not survive. And in the US, they have a clear hierarchy. They say we are in a fight for global supremacy with China, and therefore the state intervenes. And I think we, be it in Norway or in Germany, have to realize that the rules of the games have changed, and we need to have as well a more active engagement of the state in order to provide the necessary support in order to grow companies in these lead markets.
This seems very sensible to me in a way, but then I have a counter kind of question. Would that underpin the democracy or the model we have today if you went that route?
Not necessarily. I mean, you have to make a good argument of why you are doing what you are doing, but I think it could be even democracy threatening not to do it, because at the end of the day, what we are discussing is that resilience and competitiveness are two sides of the same coin. And if the government is not able to support businesses to grow in these lead markets of the future, we will have declining economic performance in Europe, which gives then policymakers less money to spend on social security.
Do you know the company Equinor, state-owned?
Yeah.
Is that what you are pointing at? This kind of connection between state and private company, or are you going
not necessarily? Further? I would just say that governments need to support companies in competing against state-backed companies, and that in the mineral space, for example, means that governments need to give Western mining companies financial support so that they can produce to a price that then other companies, further steps up in the value chain, are willing to buy the product from Western miners and not from China. So there is this price gap that needs to be closed, and there the state, for example, can play a role.
And just as an example,
yeah, sure.
In the US, that the infrastructure development bill from Joe Biden had all these provisions to favor mining companies that are within the US and Canada and Mexico, huge tax rebates to really bring that supply home, because the US knows there's going to be a copper deficit. We all want to have iPhones and drive EVs, and that copper has to come from somewhere. And so the US really has taken up a lot of money to make sure that some of those supplies are coming from within the US.
And we have now the Industrial Accelerator Act in the EU, with local content requirement suggestions. And this is a regulatory way in order to ensure that certain products are being produced here.
I understand. Okay, we have some time left, some 17 minutes, but to make sure that the audience can come with questions, I will open up the floor now. Yeah, we have one in the back, and there should be some mics running around, maybe not on their own, but far back there. Yeah. Please say your name and where you work, and if you direct the question to somebody in the panel, please say that too.
Okay, Cristian Jurado. Jeg har jobbet til I både kommune og I Varøy kommune.
Can you speak English, please?
Yes, sorry. I have been working into Bodo Kommune and in Varøy Kommune, and I have been a student from Nord University. What I think that I have seen into the last time talking about electricity and minerals is how difficult it is for administrations to realize problems and benefits of new ideas coming into the market. For example, the data centers that can bring development but compromise a very big power source of electricity while not having actually developed an energy mix that is wide enough to back up that energy mix. So municipalities are doing this too fast and maybe without thinking about all things that could go wrong into the future. And the same happens with the approval 1 year ago, I think it was, of mining in the ocean. We can see that the ocean is connected to the whole world. Here in Bodo we have this weather because the Gulf of Mexico stream comes until here. Mining in an ocean will mean that we cannot contain the contamination and that contamination of mining inside the ocean that we don't will
Thank
impact.
you. That is not the question anymore.
No.
But the first you said, I think
Is-
we captured that, and maybe it goes to all of us, and it's back to the beginning of our conversation. I think we have new industries like data centers. We needs metals, needs energy, and so on. How is this handled? And is it too rushy? Is it made decisions in municipalities? You ask that are in a way not foresighted enough. Who would like to take the first step on this?
And I think that's a global problem we're seeing in the US right now with data centers, where local communities are facing huge problems with electricity supply and large costs. And I think again that's where there's a role for government to come in and have long-term planning for demand. We talked earlier about how in Finland the electricity supply gets planned according to demand, but there's no surplus. Sweden has a lot of surplus, and in Norway it's declining. So that's probably where Nordic collaboration comes in as well, to really think about the region as a whole and to make sure that there is surplus electricity to meet the demand of those future sectors.
Yeah.
I think the demand is for energy is growing so massively and so fast in the years to come. If we think about artificial intelligence, if we think about robotics, so it is also coming back to whether Norway should focus on short-term or medium to long-term energy questions. I think it has to do both. Of course, you need to continue with oil and gas extraction, but you also have to invest massively in battery storage systems and so on, in order to have the maximum amount of energy sources available, because the demand is growing so enormously.
Berit.
I used to be a conservative politician. And firmly believing that the state should be not so strong, and all decisions should be made local. But I see now that this has to change, actually, because especially in the energy sector, and when it comes to new supply chains and minerals and metals, and because we need to have a plan and work closely together, the states, the local communities and the businesses to, as you said, priorities. It's very so we need data centers, but not for producing cat videos, for the right stuff, right?
Yeah. It was a recent report, for those who are not living in Norway, on nuclear energy, and one of the main conclusions from that committee was that the advice to the government was that this took too long, and we didn't even have the transition to develop that. So it was not the lifeline that some municipalities already have taken a very positive position on nuclear, but that report was not cheering them up as much as many hoped. Yeah, you had a question?
Hey, can you hear me? Yeah. Hey, Elias, master's student at Nord University. So I have a question about mineral crisis. Hopefully it doesn't keep you up at night longer. Most EU imports of mineral are from Congo, which is a country that produces like 70 to 75% of cobalt, which you said we use in batteries, cars, renewables. And it's also a country that has a very bad geopolitical tension at the moment, and kind of on the verge of a civil war. Is that a thing if it stops tomorrow due to civil war or other problems? Is that a thing that the industry is scared of, or do they have plans to mitigate that or replace the imports from Congo?
So we have certain minerals that mostly are located in individual countries. And you mentioned the DRC, responsible for 70% of global cobalt production. If the DRC goes offline, it cannot be replaced. And we need this cobalt for batteries, for EV production. So there's just no alternative. So that would be a huge challenge. On top of that, you have 19 cobalt mines in the DRC, and 14 of these cobalt mines are controlled by Chinese entities. So even though it is geographically located in Africa, it might be politically controlled by China, which shows you how much of a chokehold China holds over our ambitions to play a decisive role on lead markets of the future. So this is another thing that can keep you up at night.
Okay, no sleep tonight, sorry.
Sorry.
We have a conference day tomorrow as well. We need to sleep. Any more questions in this? Yeah. I'm not sure if the order is right, but yes, you, and then there is one in the back.
Hello, my name is Tuda Osus. I'm a master's student at Fridtjof Nansen's Institute, and I'm writing about the strategic importance of minerals and how this impacts different governance processes by looking at the Nussir copper mine in Hammerfest municipality. Thank you for your perspectives, and you all mentioned how Norway might offer politically justified raw materials and minerals. But in my analysis, my findings show that some of these processes might lack or be limited in these human rights considerations where especially indigenous land use is in conflict with mining activities. So my question is, how can businesses be incentivized to make sure that these human rights concerns are addressed and make sure that human rights violations are, of course, avoided, and in these cases where regulatory processes might have limited, might not work as well to assure that these concerns have been addressed properly, and of course avoid risking Supreme Court rulings on human rights violations, such as the Fosen Wind Park. Thank you.
You remember this, so we can take the second and maybe the last question in the back there, way back. Yeah, thank you for putting this into the equation while the mic is going back there. I can mention that in March, I think it was 2025, when the Minister of Foreign Affairs, the one we had at stage earlier this morning, gave his annual speech to the Parliament of Norway on foreign policies. He said at the time that the biggest challenge Norway had in the foreign policy was the reputation on seabed mining. So there are many aspects on this that is not in addition to what you have brought forward, just to mention that. Yeah, please go ahead.
Yes. Hello, my name is Ole Martin. I'm the chair of the Barents Regional Youth Council. And my question is, I noticed in the keynote that only 58% of the workforce work in the private sector in northern Norway. At the same time, I know that the statistics show that employers in northern Norway are screaming for the competent workforce. So does the Swedish mineral industry, LKAB. I remember being on a conference where they are also screaming for competent workforce. I was wondering if you have some insights in how we can find this competent workforce, when we also know that, for example, in Norway and Finland, young engineers cannot find work. And also in Norway, only 50% of young people see opportunities in their home region.
We do as in the Bible, the last will be the first. Can you answer?
Oh my God, we cannot sleep ever before we find a solution on that challenge. I don't know the answer, but I think the businesses have a major job to do when it comes to finding a way to including and recruiting young, newly educated people in our region. And I saw also a concern when it comes to the use of artificial intelligence, that students now feel that even harder to get a job when businesses don't have to recruit newly examined students when they can use AI. So I don't know the answer for your challenge, but I know that the businesses themselves are part of the solution. They have to see the challenge, they do see the challenge, and they have to find a way to include more.
Everyone that lives in the north knows that that is the best place to live. And maybe we will, this is a bit of a humor, but maybe we will get some help from climate change when it gets too hot other places. But for sure, this is a very attractive area for many reasons that is beyond work only. So I'm optimistic. So you answer this question from the student from FNI, yeah, and then we give you a minute each to give your take-home messages, and then we are finished.
Thanks for the question. I'm not familiar with this individual case you mentioned. I think first of all, what is important is that sufficient regulation is in place, so that there is no Wild West and no bonanza taking place when it comes to raw materials extraction. That's important. I think what we, more philosophically, what we have to accept in a way is that as soon as you buy into the argument that we need more mining, you also have to accept that this will have an impact on nature. By definition of mining, because we have to dig. But as I mentioned, I think there is a strong impetus for all of us from all parts of society to reach the Paris climate goal. And in order to do so, we need more mining. But all the mining that we need in order to get all the metals we need in order to reach the Paris climate goal is less than what we are currently getting out of the ground for our energy needs from conventional sources in 1 year. So it gives you a perspective of what is needed. Of course, we need to first get it out of the ground, but if we have sufficiently mined, then we can go into the recycling of it. But there's no alternative to first increase mining. And that's what I really believe into. And this comes with difficult trade-offs and discussions then in society, but this is something that we cannot come around. So we have to face this discussion and these difficult trade-offs.
I suggest the two of you speak in the coffee break.
Yeah.
Maybe if you have more you want to ask about. Yeah, 2 minutes, but not each. Would you like to start? Take-home messages?
Yeah, there's a lot of possibilities in the north. We have everything that the rest of the world needs. We have the proteins, we have the seafood, we have the minerals, we have the potential energy. But we need the competence, we need the people, we need the capital, and we need the energy and infrastructure to empower the possibilities. So all the clever people that we have in this room and in this part of the region have to keep on debating these issues and try to find common ground and good solutions and more productive companies.
I think there's probably a certain irony that we're looking to the Arctic to save us from climate change, the region that is most affected by climate change, and then we're talking about now let's go into the Arctic and cause more environmental harm. So there's definitely a certain irony there. Yeah, but at the same time, what you just mentioned, we have to accept that we are competing against China, against the US, and if we want independence from them, then we need to produce certain things in Europe, and that means there will be trade-offs. And I would rather future mining or energy production or space data centers happen in Europe, where we have control over the ESG, over political stability, over human rights, than having them far off where we don't really where we don't really see them. And I think that's where Norway again comes in. You have political stability, you got a strong regulatory track record, with oil and gas, and so you have proximity to Europe, strong institutions, and so if you can translate the know-how that Norway already has on how to do oil and gas relatively cleanly into mining, into space, into data centers, then that's probably the best avenue we have in Europe.
Yes.
So echoing what Malte just said, I want to underline that we are in a fight for our future competitiveness and our future resilience. And in order to win this future, it won't be enough to focus on the business models of the past or of the approaches of the status quo, but we have to think in new futures. And in order to succeed in these new futures, we really have to bet on innovation. And this is really, I think, key for us to be able to shape our own future.
Okay, we have come to an end. I'm sorry if we disappointed you that we didn't have the recipe that solved the demography and all the problems of the North. But I heard that we are reliable, and that's a strong card, so maybe we should take good care of that one. Okay, thank you so much for questions and listening, engaging in the debate.